This segment was made possible by Catholic Charities of the Diocese of Arlington, which is funded in part by the Bishop's Lenten Appeal. We thank all who support this critical appeal and the ministries it funds. You're listening to Searching for More, a podcast of the Diocese of Arlington. On this episode, it's a fact there is no shortage of food in the United States, and yet there are millions of people one paycheck away from hunger. Hear how one ministry is feeding more than 1 million people right here in Northern Virginia. This episode's host is Billy Atwell, Chief Communications Officer for the Diocese.
Vince, thank you for joining me on the podcast.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So you run the St. Lucie Project for Catholic Charities here in the Diocese. When did you start doing that, and how were you first introduced to Catholic Charities?
I was introduced to Catholic Charities back in 2007 when someone visited from Christ House on Wheels. I was a new Knight of Columbus member, and they came to the council and talked about this new concept they were implementing and getting food to pantries. And I made a note of that, and I said I'd like to kind of look that up in about 2012. And sure enough, before Memorial Day 2012, I called up Sally O'Dwyer, and the rest is history. They put me in charge of food drives 2 weeks later. I had a full-time job. I came on staff in 2014 in September, and then took over the program in January of 2016.
What did you do for work before that? What was your profession?
Logistics.
Oh, this is kind of the perfect segue then.
Yep.
In God's providence.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, there are stories that I could tell that I just gave up. It was just happening too often, where I was in the right place at the right time, sitting next to somebody for 6 months and then finding out that we really connected to help feed the poor. And it was all in either a defense contracting mode or socially. So I just gave up. I just followed the flow.
Yeah.
Just went with it.
Yeah. God was clearly guiding you in this direction. So the St. Lucie Food Project, talk a bit about the scope of it. First, how does it function? And then how big is this program?
If I can reverse that, 21 counties, 7 major cities. It's what you see on the cover of the Catholic Herald, right?
Yeah.
And the scope of it right now is distributing 1.1 million pounds of food to over 42,000 people.
Wow. So
that's the long and the short of it, and it kind of breaks down into different regions and different modules. But it's and we've got our sights set on 1.25 million for the next year. We're going to try to bring everything into balance: the infrastructure, the volunteers, the food. You just can't go out and get 2.5 million pounds of food without worrying about the rest of how it's going to get to where it needs to go.
Yeah, and again, with you having a background in logistics, I'm sure that's quite an operation to make that happen. So is the St. Lucie Food Project delivering directly to the individual, or is it distributing food to different food pantries? How does it operate?
And the answer to that is yes.
Very good.
So we have approximately 72 locations. I call them distribution locations because we get tangled up in whether it's a pantry, whether it's a parking lot, whatever. So we start with 3 Catholic Charities pantries, one in Alexandria City, one in Leesburg, and one in Front Royal. And those are the anchors, if you will, for our infrastructure. If you look at it geographically across the diocese, it's very nicely placed. And with Manassas, our warehouse, we're right on I-95 and close to I-66. So we've got the skeletal infrastructure for distribution pretty well in place. And then we've got about 50 pantries that are interfaith, community, and even governmental. And we distribute to those. And we don't sustain any one particular pantry. We like to say we get them over the speed bumps. So in the summertime, 90% of the pantries are almost empty. And in January through March, people are paying Christmas bills, and they're empty. So we try to posture to push food out with a distribution plan for those special times of the year. The other locations, about 16 locations, are either motel parking lots, because homeless are sometimes contracted into motels. We have schools, elementary schools. We have children's learning centers. We have senior locations. We even have a winter heat shelter in Culpeper open from November through March that we are sort of the safety net for. We not only provide food, we provide consultation so that if it's not food they need or storage or maybe a unique way to solve a problem, we also jump into those kinds of things.
Who are the kinds of folks that you're helping? I mean, is there a profile of an individual that's really in most need that's coming to St. Lucie?
I have to tell you, the poor are invisible. So we're helping the poor, and you just don't realize that the poor may be in a conversation with you and they just don't want to admit that they're one paycheck away from coming to a pantry.
Wow.
There was a study, and I don't know what the acronym is, I'm sorry, but it's ALICE, ALICE, basically Asset Limited Income folks. And they did a study, United Way in Virginia, and in Fairfax County and Prince William County, a family of 4, 2 adults and 2 children, need to make $85,000 to make ends meet. And that's breaking even.
And that's not luxury. That's not college savings. That's just making
No,
it.
and the most expensive item, they put a representative budget on what these folks have to face in each county. Childcare is the most expensive item because both of them have to work. So you're really talking about people being 1 or 2 paychecks away from needing help. And it may be short term, it may be long term. There are also people, each one of our locations, just taking our Catholic Charities locations, is unique. The Front Royal in particular, it goes back to the company town. And the company went out of business because it was pushing PCPs into the Shenandoah River back in the 80s, shut down. People didn't really pursue education because they said, what do I need to do that for? I'm going to go work for the company.
Yeah.
Well, it crashed. And those folks are young enough so that they don't qualify for those programs when they hit 65. They're trapped. So, that's each location has a story.
Give us an example of some of the kind of witnesses you've seen of people who have been in need, or just some kind of practical stories of folks that have been helped by St. Lucie Project. Paint that picture for us.
Sure. So following up with the theme of being invisible, we do blue bag food collections. And so I was working with one parish, trying to get to the blue bags and recovering them and making sure we got them back and after the drive. And as we were doing that, one of the staff members in the school basically said, she just happened to mention, we haven't had meat in our family for about 3 weeks. And it was kind of like a showstopper for me. I mean, this is my business. And so I'm, logistics, get it from point A to point B as fast as you can and so on and so forth. Well, it added a different dimension to me. You got to slow down. You got to pay attention to what's happening. You got to listen. You got to size things up. Don't always be in a hurry, to get from point A to point B. Take people on board because of what we talked about. You could be 1 or 2 paychecks away, and you got to get those signals. So that was one. Another one, which is an extreme, we got a call through one of our pantry managers that a pantry was in trouble in Strasburg. In fact, the name of the pantry was Restore Hope. And it's a blue-collar town. And they just hardworking people, it's just bad luck. And lots of people were out of work. And this pantry, as we were approaching June, didn't know where it was going to get the food to sustain the people in Strasburg. So long story short, we did an analysis. We asked the pantry manager to tell us the core basic items they needed. And we kind of provided a safety net for 90 days for that town. Now, along with that, we just renewed our contact with them this year. And yes, they needed some food, but it was different kind of food. And we talked about the sponsors. Are the same churches still supporting? And they're putting in a development plan so that they can do more fundraising. So as I said, we can't sustain a pantry for long term, but we want to be there to help people get over the rough spots and then move on. And while we're there, help them become independent. So that's what we're going to be doing over the next few years with this particular pantry.
That's, I noticed, a focus of Catholic Charities in this diocese in all of the programs is getting people, or in this case, food pantries, to a point of self-sufficiency. It's not that you want to be having to feed them forever, but it's that you can get them to a point where they can sustain on their own. Because I know we've got similar initiatives in other programs, like with refugees, for instance. It's not that we want to be providing them housing forever, but let's get them started. Let's help them get over that initial speed bump and then get them on their own. But they need that early help. It seems like that's a focus of this ministry too.
And that's what Pope Francis said, uplift them, get them on their feet, and let them go.
Yeah. I find this issue, it peculiar in a country like ours with as much food as we have. It's not like there's a food shortage, right? There's a level of poverty with folks that, like you said, people will be one paycheck away from hunger, not one paycheck away from having to dip into savings or go into their emergency fund.
They don't have savings.
It's one paycheck away from not being able to provide the most basic thing. What do you make of that, just on a personal level, that you're constantly dealing with folks who can't provide this basic need? It's got to be heartbreaking.
It is, but the fact we have such wonderful volunteers, and at our Front Royal location, Leesburg, and Alexandria City, in particular for the Catholic Charities locations, what wonderful, patient, compassionate people we have. And they provide the strength for these clients. So it is very heartbreaking. Food is the number one item that's on the garbage dumps now. Plastic bottles is right behind it, I think. It used to be number one. We don't get into food. Companies call us, little concerns call us, and we can't handle the food that's already prepared to distribute it because the warehouse is such that we don't have that kind of capability to give it to pantries who could use it like within hours.
Yeah, its shelf life is real small.
Right.
Yeah.
The pantries are really tuned into that kind of stuff. So we tend to just get the food just in time to them and make sure that that food is not sitting on our shelves. We're not trying to be the biggest warehouse, and come in and brag and look at all the boxes of food we have in here. We're a failure if that happens.
Yeah, you want to show it off when they're on the truck. Right?
When they're on the truck, and
Yeah.
it's got to be out there.
Yeah.
It's got to be out there to the people.
So where does the food come from?
Food comes from the generosity of our diocese, the parishes. Approximately 400,000 pounds came from 43 parishes participating.
Wow.
And, we have 70 parishes, with the missions a little bit more. Our goal is to get 100% participation, but as I talked at the beginning, we want to make sure everything's in balance. So we don't want all 70 parishes to, we're going to go out and we're going to talk to each parish and find out what their food insecurity challenges are, their parishioners. If their parishioners don't know where their next meal is coming from, we want to make sure the parish is ready to serve them. And if they don't have a connection to a pantry, or if they do, we want to be involved with their strategy. But the food is coming from the parishes, and that's after they take care of their parishioners, after they take care of maybe their local food banks that are in their area. We're the third stop. Once they take care of their parishioners, then we say, can you take care of those who don't have the resources? So the Shenandoah Valley, the Northern Neck are perfect examples where you're not resource rich. But we follow that three-step process because it's really important to take care of the parishioners first, get them in place, get them taken care of, and then they can do up to 3 food drives for us a year and still take care of their people. The parish I belong to does 15 food drives a year.
Wow. And
I wasn't run out of town yet. So, I don't do anything that I haven't practiced myself.
Right. So there's non-perishable food. That's the stuff that would get stored and delivered kind of on an as-need basis. Then you've got the food that you can't take is kind of the cooked food from restaurants
right.
and markets and things. Now there's a middle ground of fresh food that can be stored for a certain amount of time that you can deliver. And you guys have recently gotten into that quote-unquote business. Talk a little bit about the fresher foods that you guys have been working on securing, preserving, and then distributing as you can.
Thanks to the generous donors and our volunteers, we've basically gotten refrigeration and freezer capability. And that has opened up what we videotaped back in October of 2015 in the volunteer video that's on the website and YouTube. We now had, for example, 77 middle schoolers on July 19th pick over 10,000 pounds of fresh corn down in the Northern Neck. There's a wonderful opportunity down there with some Christian farmers, and we work with a local food bank down there. Over 10,000 pounds in 2 hours. And we took 5,000 pounds of that back to the warehouse because we had a distribution plan for 5,000 pounds. We didn't want to take anything back that would go to waste or would sit around. And so the rest of that 5,000 pounds went to the food bank in the Northern Neck, and I can guarantee you it went to people who needed it. So that is extremely exciting. We've been trying to get to that point for a long time. And again, thanks to our wonderful generous donors, small donors and large donors alike, really grassroots support, just absolutely wonderful. And so we're putting together distribution plans for future sources. But we don't have to go out and pick it. We can go and buy that stuff and put it into our new refrigeration. We have 18 pallet slots that we can put food into. In our budget, I've just set a goal for when we get our volunteers and trucks and all that in balance, up to 36,000 pounds of fresh food a year.
What does that do for the individual who's receiving it? Because I would imagine, I'm sure they're grateful to be receiving, dry food and, canned foods and things like that. But I would imagine that just their spirit in receiving fresh fruit, vegetables, meats, things like that, I would have to imagine that really uplifts them. Kind of like the person you're talking about at the school, that to get that really is just even if it's just for a little while, just a relief of that burden. It
does, because they have to make decisions on whether to pay the rent or buy an Xbox for their children because they're so guilty about what's happening. To put that fresh food in front of them is absolutely a game changer. The health of the poor is a great concern because they're not eating healthy foods. It may be cheap and all they can afford, but of course Catholic Charities doesn't charge a penny to those who are receiving the food. And to put healthy food, and I've just talked about corn, the other three crops that we're going to be going for are kale, squash, and broccoli. And those are sort of the fall crops, and if the weather's good, we can go into the second week of December to get that kind of quality.
Now, why those crops in particular?
Because they're good for the area. That's what they're growing in the area, and they're more cold weather crops. For example, in that YouTube video, we were picking broccoli, and it was October 30th that we brought some homeschoolers out to Parker Farms out there in the Northern Neck.
That's wonderful. What is the greatest challenge you face in providing for the needs that are out there, whether that be just you personally or just the ministry in general? What's the greatest challenge you think?
Yeah, the challenge now that the refrigeration is solved is now getting everything synchronized. We could leap forward to the 2.5 million pounds and get food sources and just get that end of it going, but we have to have more volunteers to collect the food, process the food. I don't even say store it anymore because it's got to go out the door, and distribute it. So, and we need the drivers, not only the people who are in the warehouses and volunteering to give the food to the clients, but we need people in the warehouse to help move that food. So if you want to put Pilates aside and come out to a warehouse, we can give you a pallet jack and you can be slinging some food across the warehouse. We also need drivers to go out to different counties. We have Sheehy Nissan in Manassas. They deliver food boxes for us. What a great relief it was. And they sometimes combine it on their parts runs, but sometimes they don't even have parts places where they go. They've had a truck go out to Front Royal bringing 55 boxes.
Wow!
And what a lifesaver that was for us because we're trying to get drivers to take the food out. It all has to be in balance. We don't want to waste any of that food.
So if someone was that's a driver, are they using their own vehicle, or are these vehicles owned by Catholic Charities?
We first give them a vehicle to drive owned by Catholic Charities, and of course we get them to take a course, and we run an authorization on them so that they're cleared to drive. Very simple procedure. But we have people, in fact, going on right now as we're speaking. There's a grocery store pickup out in Prince William County where we pick up hundreds of pounds of food each week. And this particular crew, and they alternate every other Monday, they take their own private vehicle, and we give them coolers, and they put the food and the meats in those coolers and bring them back to the warehouse, or they bring it right to the pantry. In this particular case, they'll bring it to Holy Family Pantry in Dale City.
So are those foods that are just being donated by the grocery stores, or are these?
Through the Capital Area Food Bank, a wonderful partner in Lorton, in this particular case for this particular geographical area. We have the Blue Ridge, which is a wonderful partner, Blue Ridge Area Food Bank for our Front Royal and Leesburg locations. Without the two of those food banks, absolutely critical, they've helped provide thousands of pounds by making the arrangements under the Feeding America aegis or umbrella, so that there are literally no food fights. We walk in, we coordinate with the manager because we're sanctioned by the food bank, and we set the time up, and in this particular case, 2:30 on Mondays. We go to 4 departments within the grocery store, and they give us food, and they barcode it out, they put it on their records, and they take their credits for it.
Wow. So obviously monetary donations give you a lot of flexibility to buy what you need when you need it, but it sounds like volunteer assistance is something of great need, people to help move things and drive things.
Yeah, and let me give you the other extreme. 19 pickups a week are happening in Front Royal. So wow. 19. And if you miss one of those appointments, there are people waiting in line to take your spot to get that free food. So there's a tremendous amount of sacrifice. And I mean, I'm just blown away by the dedication of the volunteers who want no fanfare. Some of them don't ever want to see another spreadsheet ever. They don't want to sit behind a computer, but they want to handle that food, and they want to get it to people who need it. And we need more people like that.
And it would give them a good direct connection with those that are being helped. I could imagine it being very personally gratifying.
Absolutely.
So if you are interested in volunteering, or you want to make a contribution to Catholic Charities and assist this critical ministry, go to ccda.net, and you can find the links there for the St. Lucie Food Project. Anything else that you would want to say to those listening? Any final thoughts?
Just thank you. Thank you for the volunteers across the diocese, the tremendous job that you've done. And I'm here to tell you, if the volunteers, we have over 750 volunteers, some of whom show up once a year, and it's fantastic. But they're extremely comfortable with volunteering for the St. Lucie Food Project, and we like to make it feel like it's their home, and a lot of them have made it their home. So we look forward to more volunteers and more opportunities. We're all about creating opportunities for people to put their faith into action. And one thing I'd like to add, I need to give special mention to the Knights of Columbus. Since I started volunteering in 2012, the Knights have been absolutely critical for parishes who did not have the volunteers immediately ready to go. And so for parish food collections, they've been a real game changer in making this happen. In a matter of half an hour, they can pick up thousands of pounds of food and take it to the locations we need it to take it to. In addition to that, preceding my volunteer help, we had Knights of Columbus out in near Warren County, out of Washington, St. Peter's Catholic Church out there. And they have been responsible for bringing, at that time, 10 boxes of food. Now they're up to 25 boxes of food each time they visit a pantry, and they orbit the Front Royal area, Rappahannock, Page, Clark County. They deliver food out to pantries in addition to what we do out of our warehouse. And our latest entry has been a Knights of Columbus group out of Kilmarnock, the Northern Neck. They used to have to come into St. Matthew's to pick up food there. We put a storage area out there in Warsaw, and now we have a great number of nights that have really changed. We used to give 6,000 pounds of food out there, and now they're up to about 30,000 pounds of food. So the Knights of Columbus have been, if you will, a secret weapon. And by the way, we're looking for more secret weapons. So thanks very much.
Well, thank you so much for, one, the work that you do, the critical ministry. I mean, like you said, you are helping bridge people between that paycheck and hunger. You're filling the space in between and really providing such a valuable service. We're so grateful. And I hope those listening really take seriously that call to contribute or to help, to lend a helping hand. Thank you so much for everything you do.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Searching for More. If you enjoyed this podcast, please write a review on iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher. Also, make sure you follow the Diocese and the Arlington Catholic Herald on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And subscribe to our YouTube channels for regular videos that will inspire, educate, and inform you about the Catholic faith in our diocesan community.